Hello and welcome to this week's Geek TV. I'm your host Alex Fletcher, and joining me on our latest adventure in space and time is Digital Spy's TV editor Morgan Jeffrey. Say hello, Morgan.
Hello.
So Morgan, this week the Doctor and Clara had a murder mystery adventure on a time-travelling Orient Express. Was it as silly and potentially awful as that sounds?
I don't think so. I know we had quite disparate opinions on this episode, maybe. I really enjoyed it, actually. It put me in mind of sort of your classic Tom Baker, that Philip Hinchcliffe feel. He was a producer back in the 70s. His era of Doctor Who is kind of hailed as one of the kind of golden periods of the show, and this really put me in mind of that. I think Capaldi channeling Tom Baker quite strongly. I thought it had good, strong, creepy atmosphere. I thought production design was great, some decent twists, some strong performances, and yeah, no, I really enjoyed Mummy on the Orient Express.
There seems to be quite a few nods to former Doctors from Capaldi. He's doing a bit of dancing around, which kind of had a bit of Troughton in there, and he had his garb was kind of pertwee.
Well, in previous weeks, we've actually said that one thing we're not keen on with Capaldi's Doctor is his costume.
It's just lack of it.
It's just a bit nondescript. It's not particularly. I mean, you don't want Colin Baker's patchwork quilt, but you want something that's a little bit Doctorish. And I thought he looked so much better this week.
Yeah.
Add a cravat.
Yeah.
It's immediately better. That's all you want. It's a bit of quirk.
Were you surprised that? I think you said to me not on Geek TV, but last week afterwards, you didn't think Clara was going to be in this week's episode. Were you surprised that they sort of jumped straight back in with that reunion?
Yeah. Well, at first, it opens with them together.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what? After last week, I was a little bit confused. But then they do make it very clear what's going on here. They're basically almost going through a breakup, and it's like their last hurrah. And I think some fans might be a little bit annoyed with the resolution to their kind of relationship crisis in this episode, where she basically goes, "Oh, it was just a wobble. It's fine. Onwards and upwards." But I think if you look a little deeper into that, the idea is that that's not true. I don't think she has overcome all these concerns she has about this new Doctor and the way he acts. I think, there's this bit where they talk about travelling in time and space and it being an addiction. And I think she is addicted to, TARDIS life, and so she's choosing to bury her feelings and her concerns. So possibly they'll flare up again, later in the series. That's to be seen.
There seems to be a running theme throughout the series about dealing with personal demons and things that people have seen. There's been a lot of references to soldiers and the army, and in this week's episode there's a couple of characters with sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you think this is going to link in with the Doctor and Missy and that whole storyline somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously there's, the Danny Pink character and his past as a soldier and the Doctor's reaction to that, and then this week the Mummy was revealed to be, kind of a wounded soldier who had gone wrong. And I think definitely, it's, as you say, it's obviously a recurring theme, and it is something that's going to be driving us towards the finale. I think, even way back going into Series 4, back with David Tennant and Journey's End at the end of that series, there's this whole idea that the Doctor is a general who sends other people into battle while he is the puppet master and he's watching from the sidelines, which again is something that Danny brought up and kind of threw in his face in The Caretaker.
Yeah.
And although it's a point that's raised from time to time, it's not often that the Doctor is sort of confronted with the consequences of that, of sending other people in to fight his battles. And I think at the end of this series, or maybe even at Christmas, that's when you're going to see the ramifications of that, with possibly the loss of Clara. That's my theory right now.
What did you make of Frank Skinner's cameo role appearance as Perkins in this week's episode? He's a huge Doctor Who fan.
Yes.
I think you could see that in the episode.
He's kind of beaming a little bit throughout, isn't he? Yeah. Do you know what? He's obviously not a classically trained actor, as I think his ITV sitcom Shane from back in the day, more than proved. But the thing is about Frank Skinner, he is, at least for me, he's a very likeable screen presence. So, as you say, he is almost like beaming throughout the episodes. I think it's almost hard to objectively judge his performance, because I like Frank Skinner so much. It was just kind of nice to see him in Doctor Who, because you're aware of how much fun he's clearly having.
Yeah.
It's just kind of fun to see him in it. I think it'll be interesting to see, how US audiences or international audiences who aren't familiar with Frank Skinner, the bloke who, hangs out with David Baddiel and sings Three Lions, they have no idea who he is. It'll be interesting to see what they make of his performance. I don't feel like I can judge it, really.
Even if you did dress Frank Skinner up as an alien,
you're still going, it's Frank Skinner! Yeah.
You still get the sense that it was Frank Skinner, even if you just heard his voice.
Yeah. So it's even difficult to kind of judge his character. Because, although, it's well written and everything, but it's just Frank Skinner in a flat cap.
Frank Skinner's character actually leads us neatly onto a question from a few guys this week. This comes from Terry Eastham, who asks, Who of the almost companions, almost in quotation marks, would you like to see come back? He's got a couple of his own suggestions. Who would you like to see have a return into the show?
Well, I think, there's these almost companions, these people who, could potentially become companions, would have been a good fit. There's obviously when Kerry Mulligan, who is now a big Hollywood star, she was in Doctor Who in Blink, which is one of the best received episodes of all time, and her character Sally Sparrow, that was what people call a Doctor Light episode, where the Doctor wasn't actually in it very much. So Sally Sparrow is basically the lead character in Blink, and she acquitted herself. Obviously, she's a great actress, so she acquitted herself really, really well. So I don't think she ever would come back to Doctor Who, but that would be great. There's a character in Series 1 going all the way back to kind of 2005. Again, another Moffat story, Empty Child / The Doctor Dances.
Good use of the slash.
Slash. And there was a young sort of Cockney girl called Nancy, and at the time everyone was like, she's quite reminiscent of the old style of Doctor Who companion. This kind of brassy Cockney lass, and it's like, if this was the 70s or the 60s, that's the kind of character that would have become a companion. These days it's they want the audience identification figure, so it's normally someone from the present day. And then finally, although he's kind of a companion, but Bernard Cribbins as Wilf.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a bit of Cribbins. I would have loved to have seen him like full-time companion. I would have loved to have seen, Cribbins on Mars. Basically, more Bernard Cribbins is always a good thing, in my opinion.
Peak Wilf.
Yeah, exactly. You want peak Wilf. So I would have loved to have seen him do a whole series of Doctor Who. That would have been amazing.
That's all we've got time for this week. Myself and Morgan have got to go and watch Terror of the Autons. See you again in 7 days' time when we'll be reviewing the next Doctor Who episode, Flatline. See you then.